Hey everyone, Harry here with a snapshot of the current very active landscape of election law related litigation. These suits tend to fly under the radar. We have heard about the Georgia case because it's going to trial, and Georgia has been notorious in other instances, including in 2020. But in fact, there are lawsuits, some 30 of them pending in some 19 states, and they all, certainly as a collective, they are foreboding, and each of them is a potential for mucking up the election. At least that's true for a whole class of them that really derive from false premises. For example, many brought by Republicans are trying to ferret out fraud, the fraud being the voting by non-citizens. You're hearing this as a consistent refrain of the Trump campaign. How many non-citizens have voted in past elections, at least the last couple? More or less zero. It's a non-problem. And if you think about it for a second, a non-citizen, you try to vote. Why would you do that? If you're caught and you don't have the proper papers, you are deported. It's an exceptionally foolhardy move that, in fact, very few to none make. But that is a common theme of this multiplicity of suits. The vast majority which have been brought by Republicans trying to limit the votes of classifications of voters whom they perceive as being more likely to vote Democratic. Another thing that you see repeatedly is attempts to trim or limit mail voting, which is permitted in many states, but various arguments are being proffered. Again, not very solid on the facts of anyone that I've looked at, and I've checked out the top 30 or so. But nevertheless, it's a possible thing that could tie up a particular judge. Always we have to keep in mind with election-related litigation and election-related battles, they are unusual because they're fought against very compressed and finite timeline. Something goes awry in a regular case, the appellate process in theory is there to correct it in the long run. In election cases, there is no long run. The ultimate here would have been Bush versus Gore, where the Supreme Court acted very precipitously, but it was, against a hard deadline, a justification later proffered by Justice Scalia. Somebody had to do something, and that came to us. Okay, there are a few cases pending against Trump, including for violations of 2020. I don't think we have to. They're mainly looking backwards and for damages and the like. The really important cases are brought by Republicans to try to limit the rolls and get people thrown out. A very big one here, I'll talk about it separately when there is a hearing a week from today, is the Georgia case where there are these new rules that handpick 3 members of a 5-member board who are Trump loyalists, have put into play a couple rules that would increase the possibility of delay on election night or contamination of ballots, and they're being sued on the argument that they've acted outside the Constitution. Then I've told you about the citizenship votes. The citizenship is the justification for proffered measures that make it harder for people to vote. That's happening especially in Arizona. There's a Republican Party lawsuit in Michigan that's about absentee voting and whether the Secretary of State there can cure incomplete ones. A similar thing in Nevada, which is very closely fought, and Trump may be really depending on Nevada and Arizona, again, over this bogus notion of non-citizens voting. And then there's one in all-important North Carolina as well. As I say, they're about 30. And so the main point, first point of this discussion is to just alert you to all of these, any one of which could sort of erupt, get a crazy ruling that's, and then the train is chugging down the tracks, maybe too late to reverse things. We just saw this playing out in North Carolina. It's too late to change things in many states and the like. Now, in addition, I just want to highlight one lawsuit in all important Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is really shaping up to be that. Our last podcast episode on politics, Molly Young Fast, our guest, just ended with Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania. And especially if Harris is able to make inroads in North Carolina and she wins Pennsylvania, that's the hardest one and the most important one to hold of the so-called blue wall of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. If she holds that, then she really has very strong tailwinds on the night of the election. And conversely, if she loses it with Trump's current good fortunes, as best as one can see in the polls out west, Nevada and Arizona, then she's really hurting. So I think both campaigns are focused on Pennsylvania above all. And here is what the Republican National Committee and Republican Party of Pennsylvania is doing. They have sued in the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. There are mechanisms to go directly there. And as I've said, in the time line that we're often playing with in election law, that can be really important. And so they're before the Supreme Court. And basically what they're saying is a provision of Pennsylvania law supported by the governor and present in many states would permit election officials to cure certain really flagrant, not even flagrant, there are particular errors that election officials can cure. And the Republicans here are saying that should be against the code. You have to just, when it's done, there's no provision under law. They are saying that the actions that are totally in keeping with traditional Pennsylvania practice are just departing from precedent and causing confusion for electors. So basically this has to do with voting by mail and having some, kind of technical errors, and trying to, the normal practice in Pennsylvania is simply to cure them, or give notice and cure things like signature or envelope defects, you sign in the wrong place and the like. And that's permitted in Pennsylvania, and this is being done now in mail voting, which is disproportionately Democratic. And we now have this lawsuit in the California Supreme Court saying, don't let them do it. Don't let county boards adopt these notice and cure procedures because the General Assembly hasn't granted them that authority. Implicit in all this is we don't want to permit votes that, if cured, are more likely to be Democrat than Republican, but they are, as happens generally in these suits, sort of saying implying there's a lot of fraud or error going on that the facts don't bear out, but nevertheless trying to stake a legal claim. That's going to be really important. You take these numbers of people who make small mistakes in a state like Pennsylvania, they add up enough to potentially to be pivotal. So that's one to keep our eyes on. That'll go to hearing soon in the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. And then just generally to be aware of this burgeoning landscape of largely Republican-driven lawsuits designed to trim the voter rolls of classes of people they think are more likely to vote Democrat. That's going to be a big part of the legal action between now and November 5th, and potentially even after. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.